Hi, welcome back for today's movie recap. Today, we will recap the movie, Man of Steel. A supernatural baby was sent to Earth by his parents just before his world exploded. To protect the world he grew up in and came to love, he must fight his own uncle, who has invaded the planet Earth. In a dying world called Krypton, Supreme Council Chief Advisor Jor-El was busy trying to convince the other members of the council to give him control of the Codex when his brother, Zod, suddenly arrived, invading Krypton. Jor-El escaped from Zod's men and called his wife to start the launch. Before Krypton exploded, Jor-El infused the genetic codes into his son, Kal-El, before launching the child into another world. Zod tried to stop the ship that held Kal-El, but it was too late. He was caught by the council, and in anger, he promised that he would find and kill Kal-El. Krypton exploded, and Kal-El was then sent to Earth. Kal-El landed in Kansas, where a married couple named Jonathan and Martha Kent found him. They adopted him and named him Clark. As Clark grows older, he starts developing superhuman powers that used to scare him when he was a child. The first time Clark realized he had X-ray vision, he got scared because of it and ran to hide inside a storage room. When the teacher tried to get him to open the door, Clark angrily looked at the doorknob, and it became so hot that the teacher yelped as she took her hand away. His mother arrived a short while later and comforted Clark, who trusted his mother and came out of the storage room. As a teenager, the school bus that Clark was on fell into the water. Without anyone realizing it, Clark let the ship go and looked for the boy who'd always bullied him, saving him from drowning. Instead of thanking him for saving her son, the boy's mother talked to Jonathan and Martha about Clark's abilities. Clark was sitting at the back of his father's truck at the time, disappointed at how people seemed to look at him like he was an alien. Seeing how sad his son is, Jonathan told Clark about his true identity. He led Clark into the basement and showed him all the things that came with him when he first landed. Clark asked if he could keep pretending to be Jonathan's son, and the latter hugged him, telling him that he was his son. Then Jonathan gave Clark the small device that came with him when he first landed. Now a grown Clark is living off low-paying jobs. When he got into trouble at work at the bar for defending a woman, Clark decided not to fight back, but later, when the man went outside to smoke, he saw his truck pinned against the electric pole. Clark decided to set off to find the Kryptonian scout ship in the Canadian Arctic. At the same time, a Daily Planet reporter named Lois Lane was also in the Canadian Arctic on an assignment to investigate the discovery of the ship. There, she met Colonel Nathan Hardy and Dr. Hamilton, who were also there to investigate and watch over the ship. One night she was taking pictures when she saw Clark going somewhere, and she decided to follow him. Clark entered the Kryptonian ship and saw a machine with an empty hole in the middle. Clark put his small device, which turns out to be a key, into the hole and turned around when he heard something, only to see a floating machine peering over him. The machine attacked him, and Clark used his strength to reach the device and push the key. The power of the ship turned on, and the floating machine stopped its attacks, seemingly aware of who he is now. Clark then saw a vision of Jor-El, and he followed him. Lois, on the other hand, has entered the ship and seen the floating machine too. She took a picture of the machine, and it attacked her. Since Lois is just an ordinary human, she easily lost the machine again, and when Clark heard her screams, he rushed to save her, destroying the machine with his bare hands. Clark tended to the panicked Lois and saw that she was injured. Clark used his power to heal Lois' wound, and the latter screamed in pain. Later on, everyone in the base camp was alerted when they felt the ground trembling. They went out to see the Kryptonian ship fly away. The next day, Colonel Hardy went on a rescue mission as they searched around for Lois. They saw her lying on the snow with no ship in sight. At work, Lois presented an article she wrote to Perry, her boss. The article was about what happened on the ship, and Perry refused to print it because he didn't want to publish an article that talks about how aliens walk alongside humans on Earth. On the other hand, Clark finally met his father, despite the fact that Jor-El was just a projection left behind in the ship. Jor-El told Clark the whole truth about his identity and everything about Krypton. Jor-El also told Clark that he is a lot different than the other Kryptonians because, while Earth has a weaker atmosphere, it is more nourishing. Therefore, Clark became a lot stronger than any other Kryptonian. Clark accepted everything and dressed up in his Superman suit. He tested his powers and his limits, and he had fun doing so. Concurrently, Lois was searching around for Clark. She went from city to city, asking people questions, until she learned about a man named Pete Ross, the student that Clark saved from drowning. She visited Pete at work and asked questions about Clark. Afterward, Lois visited Martha to talk to her about Clark. That's where she learned about Clark's late father, Jonathan. She visited Jonathan's tomb and waited for Clark, figuring out that Clark would be going there too. When Clark arrived, Lois eagerly questioned him about all the things she was curious about. Clark told her that Jonathan believed that the world would reject Clark if they found out who he really was. Then he told Lois what happened before his father died. Clark and Jonathan were arguing in the car when they encountered a huge tornado. Jonathan told Martha and Clark to take cover while he helped other people. When they realized that their dog had been left behind in the car, Jonathan went back to the car. A car flew towards him, and he jumped into the car to avoid getting crashed into. He let the dog run away and limped out of the car. The tornado was already close, and there was no way for him to escape from it unless Clark used his power to save him. But Jonathan didn't want Clark to use his powers. Clark could only watch as his father died in that tornado. Eaten by guilt, Clark admitted that he let Jonathan die because he trusted his father, who was convinced that the world wasn't ready to meet a supernatural like him. Moved by Jonathan's sacrifice to keep Clark's identity safe, Lois went back to the Daily Planet and told Perry that she was going to drop the article. Perry was suspicious that Lois, who was adamant on publishing the article, was now suddenly dropping it. After a long time of traveling on his own, Clark finally went back home to his mother, who missed him so much. Clark told Martha that he finally met his true parents, and Martha was happy yet worried at the same time as she was afraid she'd lose Clark too. Clark hugged his mother and promised to never go anywhere. In the command center, General Swanwick arrived and talked to Dr. Hamilton as they stared at the scene showing a UFO that had been sighted. It was then spread on the news, and the whole world watched as it showed a UFO. Suddenly, all electricity went out and only the TV was open. The TV was playing Zod's message, and they could hear him speaking a foreign language. General Zod then told Earth about Kal-El, who was hiding on Earth. He threatened to destroy the entire Earth if Kal-El didn't surrender to him. The next day, news about Lois Lane knowing who Kal-El is spread around, and Lois was captured by the FBI. Meanwhile, Clark was in a church, talking to a priest to get some advice. Clark wanted to save Earth, but remembering how he got bullied most of his childhood, Clark didn't know whether or not he could trust the people on Earth. The priest then told him that sometimes one should take a leap of faith first, and the trust part comes after it. Finally, Clark met with the soldiers and demanded that the general let him speak to Lois. Clark promised to surrender, but only if Lois was given freedom. Inside an interrogation room, Clark and Lois were talking. Their conversation was cut off when Dr. Hamilton spoke through the speakers. Clark stood up, easily breaking the cuffs around his wrists, and approached the double-sided mirror that separates the interrogation room from the room Dr. Hamilton, the general, and the colonel were in. General Swanwick told Clark that he had to hand him over to General Zod, and Clark just let them be. They went back to the desert, where Clark was supposed to meet General Zod. Clark thanked Lois for believing in him, and the two of them held hands as they stared into each other's eyes. General Zod's ship arrived, and Subcommander Farah stepped out first to extend General Zod's greetings. Farah approached General Swanwick and asked for Lois to accompany them into the ship. Farah went back to the ship with Clark and Lois. While Farah went to get a breather for Lois, Clark discreetly gave Lois his command key for the ship, and Farah came back to let Lois wear a breather as the atmospheric compensation on their ship is incompatible with humans. The ship then landed inside the mothership, where Clark and Lois finally met General Zod. Suddenly, Clark collapsed, as he was so used to the Earth that his body was rejecting the ship's atmosphere. Clark fainted and dreamt of being on Earth with General Zod, who told him what happened to Krypton and how Jor-El infused the codex inside Kal-El before he was launched off to Earth. In that dream, Clark also learned that General Zod was planning on reviving Krypton on Earth, which would destroy it. Clark woke up from his nightmare and saw that he was tied down. General Zod, who was standing beside him, admitted that he was the one who killed Jor-El. Jack Sur, General Zod's science officer, extracted Clark's genes to take the codex while Lois was locked in a room. Using the command key Clark gave her, Lois met Jor-El, who comes out whenever the command key is accessed. Lois retrieved the command key and did everything Jor-El said while Clark broke free from his restraints. Lois jumped into a pod and went back to Earth using this. At the ship, Jor-El showed Clark Lois' pod and told him that he could save Earth. Clark flew after the pod and took Lois out of it just as the pod hit the ground and exploded. Clark and Lois safely landed on the ground when Clark felt something. He immediately flew away and went straight back home, where General Zod was threatening his mother. Enraged, Clark struck General Zod and kept on striking him while dragging him on the ground. They hit a gas station that exploded and broke General Zod's breather, causing him to fall down in pain as he wasn't used to Earth's atmospherics. General Zod's ship landed nearby, and General Zod was taken inside while Farah and a large Kryptonian stayed behind to fight Clark. The three of them fought until Colonel Hardy came with a helicopter, sending out an order to engage all targets, including Clark. The helicopter was hit by a vehicle the Kryptonian threw, and Clark saved the man who fell out before tackling Farah before she could kill Colonel Hardy, who fearlessly stood against her. The impact broke Farah's breather, and the two Kryptonians went back to their ship, leaving Clark with the soldiers, who finally trusted that he was not their enemy. Meanwhile, General Zod has released the World Engine, the most powerful terraforming device, which would destroy the world and endanger the existence of humanity on Earth. Clark and Lois told the General about the plan they devised to stop General Zod. Using the chamber that brought Clark to Earth, the military troops are going to bomb the Kryptonian ships with the chamber. Since the chamber and the Kryptonian ships use the same technology, they will create a singularity once they collide, which will suck the Kryptonians back into the Phantom Zone. The plan commenced, and the civilians ran for safety as the World Engine severely damaged Metropolis. Before the impact of the World Engine could kill the nearby civilians, Clark flew and successfully destroyed the terraforming platform. Lois, on the other hand, was with the military troops, ready to attack the Kryptonians. They were met with a problem as the command key wasn't entering the chamber's keyhole, and Farah came inside their plane to stop them. Dr. Hamilton noticed what was wrong with the command key and pushed it down just as Colonel swerved the plane to collide against the Kryptonians' device, sacrificing themselves and successfully bringing the Kryptonians back to the Phantom Zone. Lois fell out of the plane and was caught by Clark. The two of them locked lips when they saw General Zod from a distance. Witnessing the death of his people, General Zod promised to kill Clark and destroy Earth as revenge. Clark and General Zod battled against each other, and General Zod took off his armor so he could fight Clark better. They kept on going at each other until they stumbled upon a station where civilians were hiding. Seeing the humans, General Zod used them against Clark, who only wanted to stop him but not kill him. As he was held down by Clark, General Zod used his laser eyes to kill a family that got stranded at the corner. Hearing the cries of the family, Clark screamed as he killed his own uncle, the last one of his kind. Lois saw what happened and comforted Clark. After saving Earth, Clark became known as Superman by humans. Clark destroyed one of the military surveillance drones that's been watching over him and brought it in front of General Swanwick. Clark promised that he would protect Earth and would never act against it. To keep his ear to the ground and easily find out if there were any dangerous situations, Clark Kent applied for a job at the Daily Planet and started working alongside Lois Lane.